Now, it's an argument the power industry hates, yet it won't go away no matter how often it insists the evidence is weak. There's new scientific evidence today that living near power lines can trigger or even cause a deadly disease. James Thomas has the story.
Well, they're right next door.
You grew up with them, initially there was no worry.
But that's not the case for Gary and Jill Christie now. They believe mounting science on the dangers of living under power lines is cause for serious concern.
Kids and leukaemia, that's the last thing I want my two children to get.
Scientists at the Jiaotong University of Medicine in China have released a study saying that childhood leukemia is 4.3 times more likely among some children living within 100 metres of power lines.
Gary, how close do you think they are to your house?
I'd say about 60 metres.
For the research to apply to Gary and Jill's kids, they'd need to have a particular gene variant which was identified in the study. But even without it, some scientists say the latest research is further evidence of the dangers of power lines.
This supports the research which we did in Tasmania, which was published last year, which showed a link between living close to power lines as a child and developing leukemia, lymphoma and related disorders in adult life.
University of Tasmania's Professor Ray Lowenthal authored a report that found that every single year a person lives within 50 metres of a power line, their risk of cancer increases by 7%. In 10 years, your chances of getting cancer leap to 70% more likely living under a power line.
The risk seems to be greater the closer people live to power lines, the longer they live there, the younger the person is at the age.
The study also found that people who live within 50 metres of a high-voltage power line were at double the risk of developing cancer than those who had never lived within 300 metres of a power line. These are frightening statistics for the Christies.
What do you think the solution is?
Underground.
For decades, residents from around the country have campaigned against overhead power lines.
No ifs, no buts. Underground.
I'm hoping to get an interview with someone with regard to the report.
Integral Energy wouldn't come to the party, so it was off to Energy Australia. Their response, well, it was predictable. No comment. While the energy companies duck and weave, some support from an unlikely corner.
There's yet to be any conclusive results from studies carried out to date to show that there's a strong association between the risk of childhood cancer and living under a power line.
Dr. Leslie Ashton works with the Children's Cancer Institute of Australia. Far from calling for the abolition of overhead power lines, she says studies such as the latest report from China are not reason enough to panic.
The latest Chinese study is based on a very small group of patients, so the results from that study could be due to chance alone.
None of you have two heads, none of you have got cancer. There is, some in the medical community that think that the dangers are really negligible. What's your response to that?
Same as, until people actually live with something themselves, they don't know, do they?
But you live with, you live with it and...
But I mean, who's to say that we don't have it? We haven't been tested for it. Who's to say that it's not lying dormant in your body somewhere, or the kids,
Jill and her husband Gary remain worried that the power lines that straddle their property could threaten their children's health. They're not on their own.
I would not want to be there when I was a young parent with young children. I think that's where if there is a risk, that's where the risk is. It's to young children.